Hi, listeners. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Cell and Gene, the podcast. I'm excited to share this episode with you. I attended ARM's meeting on the Mesa, which was held in Phoenix from October 7th through the 9th. And while I was there, I had the pleasure of recording podcast episodes on site at the event with some of the experts. And you'll hear those episodes one by one in the coming episodes. And so first up is my conversation with Miguel Forte, MD, Ph.D., CEO of Kiji Therapeutics, president of ISCT, and executive committee member of ARM. I hope those of you listening have had the opportunity to work with Miguel, or that you will have the chance to work with or meet with him at some point in your career. He's a true gem in the sector. You'll hear Miguel talk about the need for therapies to treat inflammatory diseases, and so enter Kiji Therapeutics. He shares Kiji's plan for the clinic, why iPSC-MSC therapy for inflammatory disease shows great promise, what he expected to learn at meeting on the Mesa, and 3 things he believes are the key focus of the field today. And if you want to hear more information from Miguel, check out episode 42 of Cell and Gene, the podcast. He was my guest on that episode. He and I cover market outlook perspective for the cell and gene therapy space. He also provides valuable tips to employ when seeking VC partnership and more information that's still applicable today. And so here's my conversation from meeting on the Mesa with one of my all-time favorite experts in the cell and gene space, Dr. Miguel Forte. Enjoy. All right, Miguel, welcome to Cell and Gene, the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Erin. Great to be here. Great to be with you and have the opportunity to chat again.
I know, and in person. I'm so excited. You're my first podcast at this year's meeting on the Mesa in person, and I couldn't have picked a better person, so thanks for being here.
Thank you. New location, new start, a lot of people. I think there's quite a lot of excitement in the air, which is actually what we need. I mean, we need excitement for all of us in cell and gene therapy so that we can bring this to patients.
For sure. We'll get into all of that too as we kind of go through our discussion. So I want to remind my listeners that you were my guest on episode 42 of Cell and Gene, the podcast, and at the time you were entrepreneur in residence at AdBio, which is a VC firm based in France, the president-elect of ISCT at the time, among other things. Cut to present day, and among other roles, you're still with AdBio, and you're the president of ISCT, and you're the CEO of Kiji Therapeutics, which is an international biotech based in France and Spain. Is that right?
That's correct, France and Spain. I'll come back to that in terms of why France and Spain are significant for our name.
Got it. Yeah, because that's pretty much my first question up for you, which is, what is the significance behind the company name, Kiji Therapeutics?
Now, I'll tell you, but just to go back to what you just said, it's one of the things that I have the pleasure is to be heavily involved in the field and being in multiple roles. President of ISCT, as you know, and the executive committee of ARM. Really, I mean, the excitement of cell and gene therapy. And, it all started with AdBio, where I was, at the time, entrepreneur in residence. They've asked me to go and do some due diligence on an opportunity they found in Spain. Mm-hmm. That opportunity was about MSC, gene-engineered MSCs. I did a due diligence and realized there was a great opportunity to bring value, combining new technologies into a platform. And so we created a company between Paris and Madrid. Mm-hmm. And we were looking for a name and said we need a name that would represent the 2 locations, the combination of France and Spain. And I had a project manager with me at the time, and we were both doing a search on what name we could find. But we wanted to represent the 2. We were looking for rivers, mountains, and we found an island that is an island on a river between the 2 countries. That is French sovereignty for 6 months and Spanish sovereignty for 6 months.
How interesting.
It's an island that has been used for multiple treaty signing between the 2 countries. Nobody lives there. It's a small island in the middle of the river. And we've said, that's it. It's actually the combination of the 2. And interestingly, both him and I independently found the island. Now, the island, or the name of the island and the opportunity. The island is named Pheasant Island. Mm-hmm. We didn't realize Pheasant Biotech was probably not the best cooked name. So how can we find a name that represents pheasant? And so we looked around, and Kiji is pheasant in Japanese. It's also phoenix as the rebirth of something, which is the rebirth as far as I'm concerned of mesenchymal stromal cells. So that's it. It's Kiji as pheasant, Kiji as representing an island that is really in between the two countries.
That's amazing. What a neat story.
It's an interesting also the fact that, and we'll probably come into that, one of the things that I'm doing now searching for funding is actually going into a broad geographical remit and finding new opportunities in Japan and in Asia. So maybe the name as being a Japanese name for a very cute island in between the two countries may be a signal, an omen about funding from Asia.
Well, hopefully, the professionals who listen to this will certainly help us out on that end. Well, you mentioned, you mentioned there's, that Kiji is iPSC-MSC engineered cell therapy, but for inflammatory diseases, is that right?
That's correct.
And so I would love to talk more about the company's mission, and then talk us through what you're working on, your pipeline, that type of thing.
I think there's a couple of things to say to start with. First, autoimmune diseases, inflammation, it's a major issue still, huge unmet medical need. We're seeing fantastic inroads into it with CAR-T in terms of addressing B-cell dependent autoimmune diseases. But the T-cell dependent is still a challenge. There's some opportunities which are either autologous or patient matched. There is a need for a really broad allogeneic approach. So that's one element. Another element is that MSCs have been around for ages. They're great cells, safe cells, easy to use, but they have not delivered the efficacy that people wanted them to deliver. They've been a bit of an amateurish product. We need to professionalize them. And actually the key element of Kiji is gene engineer by viral vector transduction or by actually base editing, engineer the cells for a purpose. Utilizing or using a very safe cell, engineer it and get a therapeutic product with a purpose, very targeted. Then the next step we felt, okay, if we have that, how can we actually optimize the big challenge of manufacturing? Go from a donor-based to an iPSC-based, because then you have the advantages of consistency, scaling, low cost, and actually opportunities to gene engineer earlier on as you differentiate. So really what we bring is a platform that optimizes the manufacturing point of view coming from an iPSC sourcing and the potency point of view by engineering the cells for a purpose. And in that way we can bring a proposition for inflammation. And the key element in inflammation is controlling inflammation by secreting high levels of IL-10 at the site of inflammation, because we're able to get the cells transduced with CXCR4 and IL-10. CXCR4 takes the cell to inflammation. IL-10 gene makes the cells produce high levels of IL-10. And then what we see is the impact on the resident cells by increasing Tregs, increasing Bregs, modulating the macrophage response, and so really creating a resetting of the immune system and an opportunity to control the inflammation. And what we've seen in animal models in GVHD, graft versus host disease, in IBD, so chronic inflammation of the gut, and also in skin, we've been able to increase the efficacy over unmodified MSCs well above 50, well above 70%. So we believe that we have an opportunity that will go beyond what the MSCs can go now. And anticipating that MSCs may get approval, like for the Mesoblast, will probably get approval now for the GVHD with unmodified MSCs. We believe we bring the next generation improved, more potent, more targeted product, really bringing a new benefit for unmet medical need in inflammation.
Excellent, Ada?
Sure, absolutely. And autoimmune disease specifically, and for us at Cell and Gene, we've been certainly covering it, but have noticed that especially this year, going into next year, we're going to be covering it so much more because of the prevalence it's taken. we've focused quite a bit on oncology, right? But now we're also focusing on autoimmune disease, which is also great. Why, what Kiji's doing.
That's. And I don't know what you think, but it's exactly the case, is the maturity of the system. We realized that we could use the technology for other things. So that's why, we said, okay, let's go to autoimmune, because we can deplete certain types of cells, because we know how to do this. The regulators are more confident on these technologies. We are more confident on using them on patients. For me, going with CAR-T into autoimmune is telling us that it's like you have a tool and you now realize you can do more with that tool.
Right.
So you know the tool, you know the advantages, you feel more comfortable. That's exactly a signal of maturity. What we need to understand as well is that you cannot do everything with a tool, so you need to be selective. And that's where we come into managing the expectations of the field. I recently wrote an editorial for our internal journal at ISCT, where the value of cell therapy, the autoimmune case, I do agree with all of this in terms of the maturity, but I also stress the point that you cannot solve everything, right? It's not a tool for everything. You need to decide. And the field and the investors, for instance, they felt that this was going to be fantastic. And we saw a big hype on the stock. And then we keep seeing some of the stock of these companies coming down. And then there are expected safety events. There's a blip coming down. I think we need to have mature investors.
That's that.
Investors that understand what we're doing and really understand that we are expanding, using more our tools, but we need to manage our expectations to know that we can do this, cannot do that, but still we're going to bring a lot of value with this to the patients.
Sure. And with this being headquartered or focused in France and Spain, what do you anticipate the U.S. having to do with this? Well, or when, I should say.
Yeah, well, we're a global business. Cell and gene therapy, the needs are global, and so we will expand into the US as we will expand into Asia. I have to say that my Chief Scientific Officer, Tony Ting, actually resides in the US and already has a series of connections there. What I think we need is to anchor on our work, deliver on our preclinical data, and progress to the clinical study that we're aiming to start middle of next year. And we can talk about that. As we get there, we'll be able to really come to the US. And I'm already in multiple discussions with US investors and potential partners in terms of doing some of the work, namely scientific advice work. So the US is clearly on the path. One thing that I wanted to stress as well is that there's also Asia, and I'm pointing out before. There's more and more enthusiasm in Asia. There's not only funds, but there's also companies, there's also academic centers, and there's also willingness from government and authorities in terms of promoting cell and gene therapy. So I think we need to develop our business, any company, starting where it starts, but expanding it in a global perspective, finding the opportunities in the right place to be.
Sure. Let's talk about that, the getting into the clinic next year. What does that look like? What are you anticipating?
So we want to do a first proof of concept in human targeting GVHD. So graft versus host disease is clearly an indication where standard unmodified MSCs have delivered value. They have been used in compassionate use. They have been approved in some countries. And we mentioned before that Mesoblast may get that approval on the 7th of January on PDUFA date. So clearly what we said is, if we're able to bring our efficacy a notch up by engineering the cells and using a field where they've been extensively used, so we know what they can deliver,
Sure.
It will be a proof of concept of the platform. And so we have a lined up study. It will happen in Spain, 6 centers. All the IND enabling studies are finished. We're finishing the GMP process. We're expecting the GMP viral vector to arrive. So we'll be in a position to make the submission and hopefully start recruiting patients on the second half of next year. As we do that, we will have the data coming out and really validate the platform. In parallel, we want to develop the target of large indications where the unmet medical need still remains. IBD, I've launched in the past monoclonal IBD, so I know well the field and I know the need, and also psoriasis. These two indications are very much dependent on IL-10. And IBD, for instance, recently there's been a patient profiling enabling to say there's a subset of patients very dependent on macrophage dysfunction. Mm-hmm. And we do have the opportunity, and we've seen that in our animal models, to modulate, to reset the macrophage anti-inflammatory mechanism. So bring them from inflammatory macrophages to anti-inflammatory macrophages. So as we do the proof of concept in our first indication, we will do further work on the preclinical and profiling the patient target population in IBD and psoriasis, and we will then go for those two indications in a couple of years into the clinic as well.
Excellent. Well, we'll be following that journey certainly from Cell and Gene's perspective. While you're here, I know you have many things on your agenda to, either from the ARM perspective, but also from Kiji perspective. From Kiji's perspective, what are you hoping to learn, gain from being here?
Well, first, it goes back to your point before, and thank you for raising it, is U.S. exposure, right? ARM has got the meeting on the Met, meeting on the Mesa. Meeting on the Mesa is an important one because a lot of stakeholders come to this meeting, and I want them to know about Kiji, and I'll be presenting Kiji later on today. Second, there's an opportunity for business development. There's a lot of networking opportunity.
Sure.
I'm here with my CSO, and between the two of us, we have a lot of discussions, not only to bring technology in, but also to license the technology out. And we do have several active discussions on that. And then finally, there's also some investors that we're targeting. I have a program to target investors in the US, and this is one opportunity to really, on some that I contacted already, on new ones, to do some of those discussions. So really awareness, business development, and investor relations. That's the purpose for Kiji.
Wonderful. And please remind me of your CSO's name so that we
Anthony Ting. He was with Atasys before, so clearly a very experienced, long-term knowledge and work on MSCs, and he's one of the co-founders of Kiji, so delighted to have him on board.
Good. I hope to bump into him here today too, but also to alert our listeners to who your team is, who's here, to follow you as you progress. You're also, which I don't think I mentioned at the top of our discussion, you're also an executive committee member for ARM. And so would love to know, what's your role? What are you most excited about for this year's meeting on Mesa? Because as you said at the top, we're in a new venue. So, what are you hoping to learn? What are you hoping for even the attendees to get out of this year's experience?
Yeah. So, as you know, I'm very active in ISCT and ARM.
Sure.
I think they represent different perspectives of how the field can be modulated. It's not only for the fund that I get, it's also for the responsibility that I feel to impact the field that I work on, those two organizations. ARM has a very much industrial lobbying perspective with a strong presence in the US that's expanding to Europe. So one of my roles is take care of that European perspective to make sure that we really cater for industry in Europe. I'm actually chair of the advisory committee for Europe within ARM. Mm-hmm. But also, as I said before, to Asia. So one is that geographic spread. Another role is to be part of the executive committee and part of the board to really contribute to discussions and really align what we do here with other organizations. I'm fostering a lot of the interactions we see between ISCT and ARM, and we're seeing a lot of work together because there's different personalities, and diversity and collaboration provides a lot of value. One of the things that I'll be speaking and intervening here at the meeting is precisely on ethics. We're going to have a panel on ethics, and I'll be one of the panelists. Part of my vision, part of my objectives with ISCT is what I call a global presence for local impact, because this is a global business. The need is global, but the conditions are different, right? I mean, we don't have the same capabilities to deliver these medications, these products, to patients that in need and exist in third world countries, in other regions. So and that's in itself a business question, an ethical question, a clinical question, and I want to bring that agenda and discuss that agenda from the two organizations' perspective, and with him, the rest of the executive committee, we're very keen on making sure that we balance the sustainability of the field and the system with improving and enabling every patient that we can to get access to these medications. It's not always an easy equilibrium, it's not always an easy solution, but one thing that we should not do is, because it's difficult, avoid it. Because it's difficult, we need to tackle it, understanding that we will not succeed completely, but hinging towards success is already a great achievement.
Sure. And I'm glad you brought up the collaboration between ARM and ISCT, because I have been curious about how closely those two groups work together and in what ways. And it does sound like quite closely, actually.
There's several organizations. That's just not ARM and ISCT. There's ASCT, ESCT.
Sure,
and I think all of us bring different perspectives, and it's important to have that diversity and complementarity. Fortunately, I think between ISCT and ARM, there's an opportunity that I make the link. Before me, Bruce, Kath, now currently on the board as well. I mean, the players are similar players, and well, the great thing is the personalities are distinct, overlapping to some extent, but definitely aligned with the objective. And so we're able to do quite a few programs together, each organization bringing different things and making the output a bit better.
Sure, all for the betterment of the patient.
The objective is that the objective is always to better develop, ethically develop, adequately develop products for patients and enable the access. I think I was coming here and say, I'm going to talk to Erin. I think there's probably three things that I believe, if I were to say three words, is manufacturing, access, patient access, and investment.
Sure.
Those three words are the key focus, the key hot points of the field today.
Absolutely. We at Cell & Gene, we cover manufacturing. We cover all three, but we do cover manufacturing extensively. And if you had to say, in the next few years, what would you like to see improvements in manufacturing look like?
I think what I mentioned to you, Kiji, when we said we want MSCs, but okay, let's go from donor-based to iPSC. That's what we should always be thinking. How can I make it simpler, less costly, more efficient? And we need to do that for any manufacturing opportunity. We also need to have new technologies in terms of automation. AI is going to be another element. I mean, I'm going to be doing a presentation on AI impact or AI opportunities in manufacturing in Taiwan next week. It's the digital use, the opportunity to modulate. One interesting concept is the digital twin, where you're able to do outside, modulate what you then do on the wet lab. So it's really improving technology, innovation, finding the best, the easiest path to achieve your product. We need to think that all the time from day one. When you have, when biotechs are created, you have an idea, you have a concept. Manufacturing, enabling opportunities must be on your thinking from day one,
right?
Because it's essential. Someone said that cell and gene therapy companies are all manufacturing companies.
Yeah.
What the point is, because our product is more complex, there's more variabilities, hence the opportunity of AI anyway. We've got to make sure that we think about this from day one to optimize the process, because down the road will mean more access, lower costs, and better business opportunity.
For sure. Well, Miguel, thank you for your time. You're a very, very busy person, as evidenced by all the things you are doing with us.
Not for you, Erin. I mean, I love to chat with you. I love to chat with you. I'm not exaggerating, but I knew I was going to have the meeting today, and I was worried and pinged Neil, saying, Neil, I don't know where I meet Erin, and I want to meet her. So
Thank you. That's very thoughtful. And I was so happy that we were able to connect. But I appreciate all of your time, all of the wonderful work you're doing for globally cell and gene therapy. So this is wonderful. Thank you for your time, and we will absolutely be watching how Kiji Therapeutics progresses and have you back on to talk about it soon.
Watch this space. We may have some interesting developments in the near future,
Sure.
which obviously cannot talk yet, but I'm trying to cook things on a global perspective. Absolutely.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thanks, Miguel. It's great to have you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Erin.
Sure.